feeling better than I ever been. Cairo in his bag, this beat is heaven sent. Back up in my.
What's up, guys? It's your boy JDTheCollector. We're here at Average Joe's with the LA Collection. Today we're gonna do a little shopping today, see what he's feeling, see what he's not. You ready?
I'm ready, man.
So let's talk about how you got into collecting in the first place.
Okay, so to my earliest memory, I was maybe about 7 years old, and I was inside of a CVS or like a Thrifty drugstore. They don't have this anymore, but you guys probably remember. I saw a shiny pack of cards, and I asked my grandpa to buy it. He didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was, but it was just kind of something cool we did together. He bought it for me. I opened it up, and it happened to be 1992 Skybox basketball. And I guess the story started from there, and I just kind of fell in love with cards, and I collected any cards I could get my hands on. I wasn't too picky. I just loved the way they looked, the way they felt. I would read the backs, and just kind of that's how my journey began. It was really random.
So what was the card you were looking for back then? Like the Grail card, you would say?
I guess it was the '89 Griffey, believe it or not, the Upper Deck Griffey back then. Probably because I saw it everywhere, like on Beckett magazines, and a lot of people were interested in it. They would talk about it, they would want it. So it kind of made me excited for it, and I eventually did end up getting one. But that was the card back then, I think, for just about everybody. But again, I was really new. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what cards were what. So it just kind of like what I would see everywhere, it just, that would pique my interest, and that's what I wanted. But I didn't really have a flow yet. That didn't start until I was like a teenager when I really started collecting.
So what were you collecting at your teenage years?
So actually, luckily, when I really started collecting was 1996. So all the packs I was buying was Kobe, right? And I live in LA, huge Laker guy, so I happen to be buying a bunch of Kobe stuff. So that's when I really started, and then that's when my collecting started getting bigger and bigger and evolving from there.
So I know you love Kobe, and then you were more into, like, I guess the vintage side as well, right?
Absolutely.
So how did you go from '96 Kobe all the way down to the, what was it, like your vintage? So how did you get to that point?
It's a good question. So I could only buy like 1 or 2 packs when I went to a card shop, right? So I went in, and I had friends that would break boxes, but I would only buy the 1 or 2 packs. So my volume was very low, but my luck was zero. I mean, all those years, maybe like good 4 or 5 years of buying packs, although I was buying very like small amounts, I never really pulled any good cards of like value, or I think I pulled like maybe a couple base Kobe cards. Even the rookies, I wasn't just lucky at pulling. And one day I was inside of another card shop, and I was just walking around, and I randomly see this old raggedy card, no autograph, no serial number, not graded, ugly, like, bent down the middle, and it had a $3,000 price tag on it. I'll never forget. And I thought, why would somebody pay that for? It looks like trash, right? And it turned out to be a 1933 Gaudi Babe Ruth number 144. There's 4 in that set, and it's the one where it's a full body. He's posing with the bat. So I went home, and I had just gone to the internet. I was 6 years old, and I just started Googling him, researching him. I asked my mom to take me to the public library. I checked out every book I could on Babe Ruth, and I just ended up falling in love with him and all the vintage guys. And from that point on, I still buy modern cards, but I would say I would be about 80 to 90% vintage collector from that point on.
I can't believe a Babe Ruth card. So I guess baseball is more your love, right? Since you're going that far back.
Absolutely.
So I know you had a Mano card, right? A Mickey Mano card.
I used to have 2 1952 Manos, yes.
And that's how I first started following you. You had a Mano card. So let's talk about, and that card is really pricey. So let's talk about having that and how you were able to acquire that at the time.
So I bought that maybe like 6 years ago. So totally different market.
Yeah, of course.
And to be really frank with you, I had a lot of really nice cards, but nothing that was really special. So I wanted to get something that would be like a centerpiece to my collection at the time. And everybody, no matter how expensive it was or cheap it was or whatever, everyone would always talk about the 52 Mano as being like that Grail card. So I started looking into it, and then finally I found one at an auction house, which at the time I think was like $12,000. Which seems to be like dirt cheap in today's store, because I think that card is probably easily $80,000 today, but I mean, no big deal, but it happened. So I was able to go ahead and pull the trigger, and I bought it, and then a couple years later I ended up selling it And if you care when I sold it, it was at the end of 2019. So right before things got
the boom.
crazy. Yeah.
Jeez. And then I just can't believe how you went from the 90s all the way to baseball, and then now baseball is like the biggest. I feel like baseball is really slow compared to basketball, the way the market jumps up.
I agree.
So you weren't looking into how about basketball players back then, back like in the 1960s and all that? Were you collecting at that time as well?
Not then, but I do now.
So what cards are? I mean, I can only think of like Bill Russell and all that, but who are you looking for right now?
So I buy a lot of early cards like Pete Maravich cards. Bill Russell's obviously great. Jerry West because he's a Laker. But there's a lot of great cards. Nate Archibald, a lot of great cards that you could collect from the 60s and 70s. Unfortunately, there's not much to pick from before that, because if you look at vintage basketball, it's very spotty. There was a set in 57, and then there was no set till 61, and then there was no set till 69.
Yeah.
And then 69, 70 is when they started making a set every year. So it's tough to kind of acquire some of those cards because they're so expensive. You have little to choose from. But I would say just about any card from that era is going to be a great card.
Do you like the art of it? Is that the main reason why you like it? Because there's not too many editing on the cards back then. It's more like just the portrait of the player of the time.
I think the lack of it is what attracts me to it.
Oh, it's low. It's
the simplicity.
Simplicity, yes.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds you of how, if you look at the cards, you'll think of that time in history where things were simple, things were more straight to the point, there were no parallels, there were no inserts, right?
Yeah.
There was really even no such thing as a rookie card. I mean, we invented that term in the 80s, really, to my understanding, or
Yeah.
maybe the 70s. So just the fact that they were simple, straight to the point, and you didn't have to think about all the different versions of that card. There was one, you either have it or you don't. I think that's one of the things that attracted me to it.
That's so crazy. So now, when you're talking about it wasn't really it's very low. Now modern cards, they're all numbered. Some of the rookie cards.
Sure.
So I was having this discussion with FD earlier. Can you imagine? I'll give you a perfect example. LaMelo. Anybody? These new young guys. Rookie Prism, numbered. Can you imagine? And it's graded 10, and an auto, and all the perks and everything. Can you imagine where the market will be in 20 years from now? How do you think that's gonna look?
Look, to be honest with you, if you asked me that question 5 years ago, I would tell you the market would be terrible. It would all go down. But we have a new market now.
Yeah.
So I would be completely wrong. In today's market, if the player pans out, I think there's only one way to go, and that's up. So if you believe in a if you believe in a player, yeah, it's definitely a good idea to buy some of those cards, especially like you said, the serial number, the low number, the parallels that are hard to get, because the new sports memorabilia, the new sports card market we have now, there's more younger collectors jumping into it, and they are buying them despite what anyone's opinion might have been, including mine 5 years ago. So I think if the player pans out like a Luka, then it's a phenomenal buy.
Yeah, I completely agree. So let's jump to a different subject. You do a lot of memorabilia, right?
I used to do a lot more. I still do. I like autographs and things like that. I stick to cards as much as I can, but yes, I do memorabilia as well.
I saw that you had I think it was the basketball was all signed, right? The 2003 Laker team?
2001.
Yes, okay. So let's talk about that. Like, how were you able to acquire it and just used to have it, and how was that feeling when you actually did have it, when you have it?
You know, I'm so surprised you asked me, and I'm really glad you do, because that's a really special ball. So that ball, I traded for some cash and an autographed Michael Jordan jersey with the guy. Now, what makes that so special, it really, the transaction was very simple. It was, here's the jersey, here's some cash, and then I got the ball and some cash for the jersey that I had, for the Jordan jersey.
Yeah.
However, what was really cool about that, I don't know if I told you this, Jeremy, but I actually purchased that 5 days before Kobe died.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
the week that he died on a Sunday morning. I want to say I purchased that Tuesday, something like that. Wow. And I remember when he died, it blew my mind. I'm like, what are the chances? Because I never owned a Kobe signed ball, and the week he dies, 5 days before. So it's one of my most special pieces I've ever owned, and I probably will never sell it because, I mean, I bought it, right? It was just, the way it happened was amazing.
I just feel like the nostalgia behind it, just the meaning, and then it's the whole team.
Yeah.
And I feel like autographs, especially, I know autographs on cards hold value, but I feel like going out of the hobby, like jerseys and basketballs, I feel like it's low number too as well. So I think having something like that is amazing. So I forgot what else you had on there. It was something about I'm not sure, but you have more memorabilia, correct? I can't think of it right now, but I think it was like a ring, or I'm not sure. Pins, yes, there you go. So talk about the pins, because you have pins back in the 90s, not 90s, early pins that a lot of people can't have, because I can't find, because I saw a story on your Instagram story, you have pins. I was like, pins, is that even a thing? So just talk about why pins, like.
So I was really pleased to know that you were asking me about that, because the pins are sort of like a gateway to my childhood.
Okay.
When I was growing up, and I really, as a teenager, when I really got into Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and Mickey Mantle, all these guys, I mean, I hate saying this because it just bothers me, I don't use this term, but I really obviously could not afford that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like a Babe Ruth card today, if it's 10 grand, back then it was $600, but when I'm making $525 an hour, $600 is all the money in the world. So I couldn't afford to buy the cards at all.
Yeah.
But what I could buy were the pins, because the pins were like $20-30 on eBay.
Yeah.
So I ended up buying a bunch of Babe Ruth pins, and I ended up sending them to PSA. So at one point, there's like a 1934 Quaker Oats pin. I would say 50% of the PSA population was mine. There's a 1935 Quaker Oats pin. It's a metal version. I want to say maybe 80% of the PSA population was mine. So, but I was buying them for like $20-30, and I was grading them for $8-10, you know, and they were worth like $50-60. Now, obviously, they're hundreds or thousands, but that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked, because when I got into pins, people weren't valuing them. And I was valuing them because that's the only thing I could get my hands on. Even back then, the cards were really expensive. So I just thought they were cool. And my mindset was, and maybe you guys can adapt to this if you get into vintages, I wanted something from Babe Ruth from when he was either alive, which he died in 1948, so anything from 48 back, or from his playing days, which is 1914 to 1935.
Wow.
And the pins were from the 20s and the early 30s. So my mindset was, I want to acquire something from his playing days, that made in his playing days.
Wow.
But something that was cheap that I could buy, and I ended up buying just a bunch of pins.
That's cool. So dang, you really went outside the box with all your memorabilia and everything, and then it's paid dividends. But it's so cool because you actually wanted that. Like, that's what you're interested in.
Yeah.
And I feel like everybody needs to realize, like, the hobby's not fun, or collecting's not fun if you're not doing it because you love it.
I completely agree, and that's a great point to make. I'm glad you bring that up, because look, if you love it, two things are going to happen. Either whether the price of it goes down, you're not going to be mad about it, because you still love it. You have that passion for it. You love it. You enjoy it. I mean, if a card is worth $30, but you look at it and the pleasure you get from it is priceless, who cares if the price goes up or not, right?
Yeah.
But if the price goes up, then it's like, wow, not only do I have a passion, but now, you know, I have a little bit of an investment here that I can do something with if I wanted to.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. So, like, I love Kyrie a lot. So everybody's like, why are you buying Kyrie? I'm like, that's who I love. Like, I know he's crazy, you know, with his whole situation, but I don't care. Like, it's the person I really enjoy watching play, and
Sure.
I don't. Of course, his prices went down because he sat out for half the season, but
Even better for you.
even better for me. But I just appreciate the person. It goes back to what you're saying. If you buy what you like and you love something, the investment return, it doesn't matter, because it's always, because the sentimental value is always going to be there.
I completely agree.
But and then did you ever do baseballs? Were you into that market as well? Sign baseballs as well?
Yeah, signed baseball, signed bats, signed photos, things like that, signed jerseys. Like, there's a lot of great stuff at Average Joe's shop as well. But similar stuff, I really got into it. A lot of the way I really got into signed memorabilia was, I would go to buy a collection. It's probably my favorite thing to do in the world. I go and I buy a collection, and the guy has a bunch of cards, but he goes, I have these signed jerseys or these bats or these photos. You got to buy that too. So, you know, out of respect for the collector, I would buy his whole collection. So I ended up acquiring a lot of autographed pieces, and then I ended up really liking a lot of them too. And then, of course, the collector the seller was really happy too, because I didn't cherry pick his collection.
You got the whole thing.
So I ended up getting a whole bunch of signed balls that I didn't want, but now I do want them, so I'm glad I got them.
Yeah, because signed baseballs are hard to find right now too. And
Yeah.
just in general, especially with COVID going on. But I really, just the story that you said and just how you started from where you're at now is just crazy. Especially because nobody's really collecting vintage. And for you to go out there and doing memorabilias and all this stuff is like, it's a different market. And I feel like a lot of people need to see more, there's more to it than Panini Prism and all these other cards. So it's, I really appreciate you coming out and just giving my audience and your audience a better perspective. There's more to the hobby, right? Like the interview, there's more to it. There's more to it than the cards, the person, the interaction, the relationship. So just talk about, last thing before was just networking. How do you feel, how do you feel about networking?
I think it's in a lot of ways, other than your passion for a certain item or a certain player or a team, whatever it is, I think networking is everything. But networking comes at a price, okay? You gotta be honest with people. You gotta work with them on the price, and not every deal is for everybody. Sometimes you do have to shake hands and walk away, but if you network with people and you pay them like an honest, fair price, and you explain to them why you're paying that price or whatever it is, you take time. Like, everybody is not a number, but their items sometimes do come down to a number. If you can kind of logically explain that to people, you'll start building a relationship as being a guy who you are the go-to guy or the go-to girl for certain things. I was set up at the Long Beach show this past the last 3 days, and you know, another dealer asked me, hey, how do you get your inventory? And I said, you know, believe it or not, more than half my inventory, people call me to sell it to me. I don't even call them. They're like, yeah, I got your number like 4 years ago at a show. Are you still buying cards? Absolutely. But you gotta be likable, and you gotta treat people nicely, and you know, paying cash, that definitely helps. But also, you know, show them that, like, hey, I do value your collection. This is what I think I can do, so this is what I'll pay you. And if it's fair and it makes sense and everybody's happy, people will remember you. They'll save your number 5 years from now and call you, and eventually you'll build a network of people, and they're gonna wanna come to you because they had a good experience. So to answer your question, I think networking in the long run is everything. If you're in it for 5 minutes and out, then maybe you don't care. But if you're gonna be in this hobby for a while, great question, Jeremy. Networking is everything.
Nice. So I feel like we talked about everything. Now that's the easiest part. Just browse around the store, see if you see anything, and we'll have more conversation. Now we're at your favorite spot, the vintage section.
Vintage.
So let's talk about all this. Like, if you could just tell me, why are these they mean so much to you? Like a Pat Riley, Paul Silas, all these, honestly, all these players I never heard of, but maybe you could give us a little background of why these are so special to you.
Okay, so I'll tell you why they're special to me. They're special because they're little pieces of history. You know, like you ever seen a picture of your mom when she's younger, or your dad, right? And you're like, oh my God, things were so different then. It kind of like, you get transported back then, and you try to put yourself in their shoes and what they went through and just how different life was. It kind of just gives you a glimpse into, I guess, kind of opening your mind into something out of what you know every single day. So that's one thing I love about this when I see this stuff. And also, you're talking about all-time greats like John Havlicek, right? Like, some people don't know his name, Elvin Hayes, David Thompson, but these are all-time greats. And the crazy part is that some of these people still today own records that they still hold the records for a lot of stuff that we watch, you know, like points or whatever it is, games played. And we don't value that, you know. We see like, okay, you know, how much did LeBron score the other day, you know? But LeBron is trying to break a record that somebody set 40 years ago, you know? And we got to think, that guy set that record at a different time in history where it was maybe much harder to set that record. For example, I'll give you a baseball example. Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs. That was his record in 1927, and it stood till 1961. Well, when Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs, the backstops were way further, 20, 30 feet further away. So if you were to calculate the hits that he hit that landed 20 feet closer, those are technically home runs today.
Wow.
So if you look at it, like, you know, if you compare it, some of these guys were way, way ahead of their time. And I appreciate that. That's what I appreciate the most about this.
Especially the era they played in too. Some of them, like you said, they were ahead of their time. And there's players that if you put them in their era, they might be ahead of their time and vice versa.
I agree.
So do you like collecting sets? Because I know they have a set of the 86 Fleer. The most iconic basketball set. How do you feel about collecting sets in general?
Okay, so I do not at all get a kick out of collecting sets.
Oh, really?
But there's a few sets that I do get a kick out of collecting, and one of them is the '86 clear set. I can't imagine a more beautiful set. Red, white, and blue borders, yellow around, makes the photo pop. It's just a super iconic set. I would say in some ways it's even more iconic than the 1952 Topps set for baseball, because when you think about 52 Topps, you really only think of Matt, right? And then the first and the last card, which are really tough to get, right? But when you think of '86 clear basketball, you think of all those great rookies in the '80s, right?
I
and they
agree.
didn't have official sets from '80, '81, and then they didn't have sets in '82, '83, '84. So there's a lot of players who have rookie cards in '86 that actually started playing in '84, like Michael Jordan.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So what happens is you have like 3-4 years of rookies also crammed into the '86 set. So it is rich full of rookies. It is rich full of history, and it is an absolute beautiful set. And since '86, there's been a set every single year as well. So it kind of started, or I should say restarted, the modern vintage-ish basketball sets, because there was a gap after '81.
Wow.
But since '86, there's been no gap.
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know there was a. I didn't know there was any. I didn't know there was a gap. But yeah, see, there's more to it than the average person will know about these cards, especially the vintage, because they mean something, right? They hold a value, the nostalgia, like you said. When you think of a card, you think about your parents, a space of time where they were at. You're like, man, what were they thinking? Like, what were their mindsets at the time? So I guess that's another way of seeing the perspective, is how they could play a role in somebody's life. Especially, I mean, look, these cards, you don't even see them like that. They don't even make that size anymore.
They don't. The tall boys. Yeah.
So let's talk about the tall boys a little bit, because I know you know a little bit about that.
Okay. So these are 1970 tall boys, 70, 71. One thing about the tall boys that makes them so unique is they're what you call condition sensitive. Now, every card, you care about the condition, right?
Yeah.
No matter what year, what sport, when they were made. But the tall boys, since they were oversized, and even back then there was no way to protect them, they were even harder to get in good condition. If you had a smaller card, you could possibly put it in between a book, or maybe like, a photo album that like your parents had. But there was nothing to protect the tall boys. These guys were like a weird size. So the fact that they even exist in the condition that they exist, honestly, it's a blessing that we have any of these cards in good condition. Because the minute they were made, they were just made to be ruined. Because you just couldn't protect them.
If you think they came back, let's move to a little modern. But if you think they came back, if they brought modern tall boys, you think that would be a big hit, or do you think it's just that ship sailed already?
Unfortunately, I think that ship has sailed, because the modern collectors, and I collect modern as well, so we like the standard size. Okay, so the standard size is just what we do. And same thing, there are protectors and ways to protect your card better, and sleeves for oversized cards, but they just usually don't fit into most people's collections. It's either a raw card in a top loader, or it's a graded card. And that's really about it. Anything like in a larger holder, people just don't like to store it. It's a kind of a nuisance for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's just too big of a set. 2 cards, like you can't even find a top loader, like you said. And then this baseball. I know you're into big vintage, but what about the modern, the Trouts, the Pujols, the new guys, Vladimir Guerrero? How do you feel about those cards moving forward?
So I actually do like them. I'm a big Mike Trout guy. I do like him. There's a lot of great cards in here. I see Christian Yelich, Nolan Arenado. So I do have some of these cards. Yordan Alvarez, I just bought a pink refractor actually 2 days ago of him. Yeah. So I do like this stuff. I would say if you're new to it though, tread lightly. I don't think you can go wrong with the Mike Trout, but maybe don't spend $2,000 on the Yordan Alvarez. Maybe start with the $40 card. And of course, remember, people think the higher end has more potential, but sometimes the lower end has a lot more potential percentage-wise. So if you buy a $2,000 card and this guy turns out to be a real deal, it might be worth $3,000, right? So that's a 50% gain if you're looking at it from like financial gain perspective. But if you buy a $40 card, that could easily be a $200-300 card. And at that case, you're talking about a 400% gain. And you also risk less with more upside. So if you're looking at this stuff as potential investments or future upside, you don't have to buy a $1,000 card or break a $5,000 National Treasures box. You can come to this shop and you can pick out 4 or 5 cards for like $100, $200, and you have nothing but upside on these if the player ends up panning out. So I do like Modern.
Damn, that's crazy. But why do you feel that the high-end cards are so, you feel like there's a ceiling towards it because of the price point at that point, or is it just because, or is this just too high, or you don't even feel any higher?
Good question. So I don't think there's necessarily a ceiling. I think that they're very difficult to price or appraise. For example, if you have a 1 of 1, well, a 1 of 1, there's only one. So how do you set the price? Well, you just kind of throw a number out there and you start negotiating. But if you have a one that's numbered at 500, there may be 50 sales to justify that number, so it's easier to negotiate on the sale. Now, obviously, that 1 of 1 is going to bring in way more dollars.
But how do you,
right?
sorry to cut you, but how do you determine that value? How do you do that if there's no comps on it?
So, like any and all collectibles, art, collectible classic cars, any type of collectible, you determine it by one simple principle: it's worth what someone's doing. And if you don't have a comp, well, you just kind of set the price and then you negotiate from there. And once somebody is willing to pay somewhat near that price, or maybe that exact price that you want, boom, now you have a comp and you have something to go with.
That's crazy. So up comps and everything. So if I were to ask you, hey, I want to jump into start collecting the hobby, what would be the biggest advice you would give somebody, especially a new person, barely green? Because everything when you go in the hobby, the biggest thing, of course, is what? The price. Okay, you got a LeBron, MJ, blah blah blah, the X amount. So everybody's always thinking, like you said, the price isn't always everything. So what would you tell somebody brand new, like, okay, I understand you see the prices are so high, but here maybe you could go start with this certain card or whatever it may be?
So I would not recommend any card, any player, any sport, anything. What I recommend is walk into a shop like Average Joe's, right? You got a big, clean shop here, lots of stuff to choose from. You walk in here and just walk around. See what talks to you. The way the Babe Ruth talked to me at the age of 15, 16. Maybe you might really like a certain set. Like, hey, I love 2020 Topps Chrome. So you try to build that set, or you try to get the rookies from that set, or you love pink refractors, right? So you want to get all the pink refractors. But the point is, don't buy what other people are buying. Don't necessarily watch a YouTube video of somebody saying, hey, this card is great, you should go get one because I think it's going to go up 20%. Really? How'd you come up with that number, dude? Walk into the shop and take some time and look around and see what you like. Like, I'm sure you know, Jeremy, there are people who only collect patch cards, only rookie cards, only graded cards, only raw cards, right? There's people who only collect 90s, like 90s basketball is everything else is like junk, I don't like it, right? There's people who think that way. And there's people who only collect vintage, and then there's people who will collect rookies from 2017 to now and nothing else. So develop that, don't adapt to someone else's, what they've developed. Walk around, see what talks to you, and then go from there. And hey, if you buy a card and you end up not liking it, it's not the end of the world. Just change your strategy. Okay, I won't buy those cards anymore. I'll buy something else. You never feel like, hey, if I start collecting a certain card or a certain player or a certain sport, I have to continue because I already started. No, you didn't.
So let's talk about that real quick. You're talking about don't worry if you lose any money. We all know the hobby took a little dip for, what was that, a year ago?
Big dip.
So let's talk about just, I guess, trying to get back, because people always want to, what's what I'm looking for, try to balance out what they spend. So let's talk about if you really did lose anything, don't panic, and just what your advice would be for them.
So if you don't take gigantic risks on things that are seen as perspective, then you probably won't get to that point where you have lost. So from the beginning, set your foundation where it's like, hey, if I really love my trout, let me start with $5, $10 my trouts, not a $20,000 my trout. Although I think my trout is pretty solid as it like.
Yeah, his career is solid.
I don't think you can go wrong with it. Even now, because a lot of the stuff is dipped, it's an even better pickup. Yeah. But the reality is, like, if you jump in and you say, hey, I got 10 grand to spend, and you go 10 grand in DeAndre Hunter, I mean, it might work out for you, but you'll lose 10 grand. But if you say, hey, let me go in here and let me spend a couple $100 or $50 or $10, and let me pick up a couple first moments of players that I think might do good, hey, if they don't do good, you lose $10, no big deal. You know, and if they do good, you have nothing but upside. So start small, be realistic, and know yourself. And then if you look at it from that point of view, like where it's kind of a gamble, ask yourself, what can I lose that I won't lose sleep in, or sleep over? If you buy a $100 card and it goes to 5, I mean, are you gonna hate yourself? Don't do it, because it might happen. But if it goes to $5 and you feel like, all right, I lost $95 on this, it's okay. Let me just go on to my next thing. Great.
Yeah.
Go on to your next thing.
Yeah. You don't take losses. You turn into lessons. The biggest thing.
Well, if it doesn't turn into a lesson, then that's the only way it's actually a loss.
That's true, 100% true. So I know you brought some cards in.
Yeah.
I know, and I saw you ready trying to buy some cards before we even start the interview. But
I did.
let's just start. Just show us what you brought today. Now a lot of people are going to see around in the shows right now your vintage collection.
Okay.
You brought.
Okay.
Go ahead and open it, and then just
Ready when you are.
Okay. So I brought a box with just some unique stuff, like a little bit of variety of what I collect and some things that I suggest. So I'll just go through them real quick. So one thing I love about vintage is anything with the dark border, 1962 tops, 1955 Bowman, 1971 tops, is really what you call, again, condition sensitive. So really harder to get in high grade. So when you have, like, say, Willie Mays, an all-time great in a 7, that's phenomenal for vintage. If you're collecting Zion cards and you have a 7, you're like, dude, this is trash. But if you have a Willie Mays card, I mean, this is golden. So anything like even really a 6 or above is great. Here's another card that most people would love. It's a Jackie Robinson. I just bought it on Friday at the show. So any original Jackie Robinson card from his playing days is going to be phenomenal. And also because he broke the color barrier and he's a big human rights advocate and obviously kind of like a leader in human rights in sports. His stuff, I believe, crosses boundaries of sports, human rights, Americana, historical significance. So I believe that stuff from Jackie Robinson will just continue to go higher and higher if you're looking at it as an investment piece.
He made an impact off the field.
Absolutely. And those are the best players to invest in. This is a 56 Sandy Koufax. Gotta love my Dodgers. 55 Roberto Clemente also had a similar story to Kobe's. He died in a helicopter crash. He's from Puerto Rico, but he was delivering a humanitarian aid, I believe, to Nicaragua, and he died in a tragic crash. So his stuff is definitely very popular. And then I did bring my Jordan rookie because you can't go wrong with a Jordan rookie.
You know how much this is worth. You'd be surprised. He just threw it out there. But yeah, go continue. I'm not even gonna. If I went through them, I need to actually take a call.
Are you recording audio too?
Yeah.
One card is kind of very random. You would think it doesn't fit into my collection. I brought to show you guys is a Patrick Waugh. Yes, you pronounce that Waugh, boy, whatever. So Patrick Waugh rookie. This is O-Pee-Chee, which is basically the same exact thing as Topps, but whatever's Topps manufactured in Canada, they called it O-Pee-Chee. Whatever was manufactured in America, they called it Topps. So the reason why I want to show you guys this card today is because I'm a really big believer of looking at emerging markets, and hockey is an emerging market, and this is considered high-end vintage for hockey. If you had a 86, I don't know, Topps baseball card in a PSA 9, it would be, like $10 or whatever. But for hockey, this is considered high-end and also quite rare. So I do believe in the hockey market as an emerging market. If you like hockey, do not buy it if you don't like it. But if you do like it, it's a market that maybe you can look at into maybe picking up some hockey cards.
It doesn't pick up in the West Coast because it's hockey not as big, but I've gone to shows out of state. Man, you see tables of hockey just sitting there. I just wanted to
Yeah. Oh shoot. Oh wow. Okay.
All right, so I want to take a quick second and talk about the pins because Jeremy, he brought up the pins and I'm really glad he did. So this is a Pop 1 PSA 9. I bought this raw and I graded it. I can't believe it graded a 9, but I'm super happy. I'll never sell it. I don't care what it's worth. But just to give you guys an idea, these are the pins that I was referring to. I have probably 12. I brought out the best one. But these are things where you know, I was buying for 20, 30, 40 bucks with a lot of upside. And don't think that because I bought this 10 years ago and I have upside today that you can't do the same thing. You can absolutely do the same thing. There's tons of things that you can buy and you can take a little bit of a risk, and it worked out amazing in the end. So another pin right here, another kind of tough one. Probably most people have never seen this. There's only 5 in the world that I know of. I own 4 of the 5, and the 5th one I sold it to a guy in Florida, and he graded it at PSA. So technically I own that one too. But this is a really cool pin. Whitehead and Hoeg. It was just a company that made like little novelties back then. So there's no like specific brand or like tops or anything. It was just whatever it was. This came in I want to say bread or something like that. It was just like one of those random pins. And just says hello babe, just kind of advertising Babe Ruth. This is also a Pop 1 PSA 9 that I bought raw and I graded it. So guys, don't think because I did this 10 years ago or I did this 2 years ago, the market's different, it'll never happen again. There are tons of opportunities, okay? Open your mind to really going out there, going to shops, going to shows, and looking for things that other people are not noticing. Taking the time to look through a display case and being like, oh my God, that's 10 bucks. I could probably flip it for 20 or keep it. Either way, you know, flip it for 20, buy something you like, or keep it, you know, and then next thing you know, you'll be on Jeremy's YouTube sharing your success videos or stories. I got 2 more cards. All right, guys, so the reason why I brought this card, I'll save the last one for last. The reason why I bought this card is this is my favorite card to show off. And when I was a teenager, this is a card that nobody, like most people never heard. 1926 W512, which was basically like a strip card. They came in like these little strips where you cut them out by hand with a scissor. And they were like, I want to say they were like giveaways at like carnivals or candy stores. There's a lot of places that you could have probably bought them back then. This is how cards were distributed, guys. There was no like official packs or anything. But anyway, long story short, I bought this on eBay for $75. And the reason why I really want to show this off is because I didn't really care what it was worth. What I did was, at the time I was collecting Babe Ruth, I bought the thing that was original and that I could afford. So if you're into vintage, buy the things that are original and that you can afford at the time you can afford them. And chances are it's gonna work out in your favor. Okay? I'm gonna have the Holy Grail whenever you're ready.
Ready, Eddie.
All right. So this is my Holy Grail because this is the card that I call the Genesis. I saw this card at another card shop and it blew my mind, and this is the reason why I got into collecting. So this is the Babe Ruth card I was referring to. This is not obviously the exact one I saw in that store, but this is one that I would say I saved up about 2 years worth of like side hustles, selling cards on eBay, going to shows, and I just put money aside, and this came up on eBay, and it looked nicer than a 4. So there was a bunch of other ones at the time. Right now you go on eBay, there's like one, but at the time, believe it or not, it wasn't really like that big of a seller. So anyway, long story short, I bought the best one that I saw, and it really is one of my absolute grails, not price-wise, just because this card is the reason I started reading about and really getting into vintage cards. I brought a little collection here, and these are low-grade Mickey Mantles. If you were to grade these, they were graded anywhere from 1, 2, maybe 3. I got some Clemente, some more Mantles. And the reason why I'm showing these is that a lot of people will look at this and they'll be like, oh, this is a 3. Well, in the vintage world, a 3 is pretty good if it's a Mickey Mantle.
If you haven't, LACollection came through, bought a ton of vintage cards that I never thought that was possible ever. Came through, told some awesome stories. Make sure you guys follow me on Instagram and anything else.
Yeah, guys, appreciate you joining us. I appreciate Jeremy for the opportunity. Appreciate the cameraman for all his hard work. But you guys can follow me on Instagram. It's THE_LACollection. YouTube is just LACollection. And then I do local shows. So I go to a show in Van Nuys, the Cardstock show. I also do the Long Beach Expo. Check that out. That's a huge show. It's mostly like coins and collectibles, but there's a sports section. And you can do on-site drop-offs at PSA if you don't want to ship it to them. And then additionally, I will be at the show in Arizona and Phoenix, March of this year. So guys, check it out. I believe it's called like Cards on College, but you guys can Google it and you can find it. But it's going to be about a 350 to 400 table show, and it's going to be pretty much all sports. So lots of opportunities. Love to meet some of you guys. Thanks for joining us, and Jeremy, again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.